Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good day everyone, welcome to the course on next generation sequencing technologies, data analysis and applications. We have so far discussed the data formats and we have talked about the quality control, right. So, what we are going to do now is we are going to go into the hands on process and we will actually do those tasks ourselves, okay, with a real data set. Okay. So, this is the topic that we will be discussing today, right. So, the first part will be setting up the system where we can actually do all this analysis. So, this system is required for the quality control, right, and then the next step, subsequent steps. So, we will start with that today, right. We will set up the system and then we will talk about some of the basic commands in this class. So, these are the keywords. We will use Unix subsystem for Linux or WSL and shell commands. Okay. So, going back to the flow chart for NGS data analysis, we get the read data from a sequencer in different data formats. We have talked about these data formats before. So, we have this data that we get, we then have to do something called data quality control. Okay. So, going back to the flow chart for NGS data analysis, the first step is we get read data from sequencers. So, we have seen we get this data in different data formats, right. So, depending on the platform that you are using, we get different data formats and we have talked about those. So, which we will see when we actually do this hands on. So, once we have the read data, with the first step is the data quality control or QC, okay, and we have talked about two steps in this process. The first is quality evaluation. We use a tool to actually evaluate the quality of the data, right, and based on which we make certain decisions, right. And the second part that we have talked about is the data pre-processing. Again, this comes from the quality evaluation part, right. So, once we have evaluated the quality of the data and we find certain issues, we have to go through this data pre-processing step. So, one of the first things in the data pre-processing we have talked about, for example, we have some quality score, right, issues, right. So, if the quality of the data is not very good, maybe we would have to do something like quality filtering, etc., or trimming based on quality. We have seen another scenario where we kind of get some sort of, like, let us say, adapter contamination, and in those cases we will also have to do data trimming. Okay. So, we have discussed up to this point and this is something which we will talk about in this class and subsequent classes, right. And as we go along, we will actually also have hands on for each of these parts including read mapping, read assembly, etc. Okay. So, let us move on, right. So, this is the overview of the hands on that we will learn in this class and the subsequent classes. So, we will first set up the system where we will do this kind of analysis, okay, and then we will talk about the basic shell commands that are very useful and they will be used in everyday analysis that you do. Then we have the third part, which is the data download and exploration. So, I will show you how we actually can download some of these NGS data sets and explore and see the data ourselves. Then the fourth part is the data QC, right, how we actually do the quality control. We will run this quality control on a real data set, and finally, we have the data trimming, data pre-processing step if required, and we will again with a real data we will do the we will do this step. Now, coming to the first part, that is the setting up the system. Okay. So, all this analysis will require a Unix platform or through command line terminal. Okay. So, again we need terminal. So, if you are running a Linux or Mac system, then you are okay, you will get a terminal through which you can run these commands. Okay. If you are working on Windows, if you are in Windows 10 or above, you will have this option of running Linux through Windows subsystem for Linux or WSL. Now, in Linux systems, right, so these you can also log into remote servers and you can do this work. So, most of these remote servers again are set up in Linux based systems. So, you would have to know some of these commands that we can use for running all the tools that we use in NGS data analysis. So, just a brief word about Windows subsystem for Linux or WSL. So, if maybe many of you are running Windows systems, and you can actually now install a Linux inside Windows, right, if you are running a Windows 10 or above, and this is an official version from Microsoft, and I will just show you very briefly how you can run and you can install this through the Microsoft software, etc. So, to run this we would have to use something called Windows PowerShell or Windows Terminal. We can simply search and install from the apps, and once you run this you can then install the Windows subsystem for Linux. Okay. For installation, please have a look at this link. So, you have these detailed instructions on how to do this. It is actually very simple in newer systems, right. So, you can simply type WSL -- install -d the Linux distribution name. Okay. So, whether you want Ubuntu or other type of system or Ubuntu version, right. So, whether it is Ubuntu 20 or Ubuntu 22, you can specify, and this kind of the list of distributions that are available in WSL, this is also given in the website, and you can check and then install this very simply by just simply typing this WSL -- install in PowerShell or in terminal. So, this is the simplest way to do this, but you can also have the manual installation. This is a multi-step process, and again this is given in this link. You can go and see like the step by step, there are the commands given, and you can actually run these commands, and you can identify or you can see right how this installation is gone, and finally you will get this WSL installed. Okay. But this is a much more complex process. In case you can simply do the installation by this would be the easier route. Okay. So, one of the things I wanted to discuss, right. So, maybe you want to access to remote servers and whether you are in Windows or Linux, because some of the tasks of NGS analysis, they will require access to a computational server which has more memory, more storage, etc. Right, because some of the tools that we will use later on, you will see they require a lot of memory, and you cannot run them just on your desktop or laptop. Okay. So, in those cases you want to access to remote servers, or if you are doing this process, this NGS data analysis very regularly, right, you want to set up a pipeline, right, all the softwares and tools installed, and they are set up properly in the server, right. So, those who are not familiar how to access remote servers, so we use a command called ping. I will show you in a moment, right, how this will work, and we use this SSH command, right. So, again this is the format. Usually if you have to access to remote servers, right. So, you will get an ID, right, user ID to log in, and you will also get a password, right. So, you have to use this SSH, the user ID that you get @ server IP that will be given, or server name that will be given, and once you do this SSH command, you will be prompted for password. Okay. I will show you how this works. You can copy data from the server or to the server using this SCP command. Again I can show you how this actually works. So, we will introduce these commands a bit later, this SCP etc. A bit later. Okay. So, working with the Linux system, right, this is something that is very important for all the NGS data analysis, right. So, most of the tools that we will use later on, you will see they are all built on Linux platform, right. So, you need to have this command line. Okay. So, they are built on Unix, you can run Linux or Mac, right. You need to have that terminal where you can run commands, right, and that is required. Okay. So, we need to get familiar with these commands and how do you actually run these, what kind of commands you need to use for some tasks, etc. So, we have a concept of shell in this Linux system. So, these are Unix shells called bash, csh, zsh, etc. There are many more. We will introduce bash, right. I will show you bash and then the commands that we have. Okay. So, you have something called command line, which actually is an interpreter that actually allows you to execute operations using text and commands. Okay. So, we will then now see these commands a bit later. Okay. So, what I will do is I will actually show you, right, how we get to the bash, right. Once we have installed this WSL, you will have this you can access bash, right, where you can actually load this Linux version that you have just installed in WSL, right, and then I will show you this the shell commands one after another. Okay. Okay. So, let us go to the terminal now, right, and then we will come back and we will discuss the shell commands before I actually use them in the terminal. Okay. So, here is the Windows PowerShell. As you can see, we have multiple tabs that is available. So, you can simply install these from Windows apps, okay, or Microsoft Store. So, once you have installed the WSL, you will have this shell bash that will be available. So, in PowerShell, when you open, you will get this, and you simply type bash, and it will load the Linux system for you. Okay. What I can do, I can zoom in a bit, so that is easier, right. Okay. So, we have now entered the bash. So, and you can see these commands, right. So, here you have this, it says Ubuntu 22.04. This is the version that is installed here in this system. I have already installed it through the commands that I have just showed you, right. You have this direct installation you can do using very simple commands. Okay. So, once we are here, right. So, we have now entered the Linux system, and here we can do a lot of these tasks, right. So, this is the shell, right, bash shell. The first command I will use is just clear. So, we have a clear screen. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you is that how we actually access the remote server, right. This is something I have mentioned. Okay. So, I will use the ping command to see if the server is online. So, again this this IP will be different, right, for your server, or you might have a server name that you can access. So, we use the command ping. So, it just looks whether the server is online or not. Okay. So, you can use the command ping. Okay. And you see there is some data that is being sent, and then you getting some response, right. There is some time that is given. Okay. So, it means the server is online. By ping you are checking, okay, whether that address is responding, right. So, the server is online and you can now access. Okay. If you do not get such response, that means the server is not online and you will not be able to access through SSH. Okay. So, what I will do now is we will use this SSH, right, and you will get an username, right. I am using my username that I have for the server, and followed by the server IP. In this case, again this will vary in your case, and the moment I enter this, I am prompted for password. Okay. So, I can then type the password, and I have now logged into the remote server. Okay. This is a server that is running somewhere, running this Linux platform, right. Again it shows like this is running Ubuntu 17, right, and it is running this version, and we can do a lot of complex tasks, computational tasks in this server because of the RAM and the storage that this server has, right. So, for those of you who want to do this analysis a lot, right, you want to doing this for huge data sets, you would like to set up this pipeline on a computational server. Okay. So, this is how you access remote servers, and then you can do a lot of things. Okay, we will talk about this later on. So, what you want to start with is the basic commands that you can use for this terminal, right. So, or the bash, right, and these are the basic shell commands. Okay. So, let us now go back to the presentation and look at these basic shell commands, and then also demonstrate, right, these basic shell commands here, and you will see how to use them. Okay. Okay. So, the first command is called man. Okay. So, this is actually generating manual for certain commands that you use, right. So, if you do not know how to use certain commands, what it does, what are the options that you have, you will use this man command. Okay. And you will get the detailed instructions and details of how to use that command. One of the most basic commands is ls in Linux, right. So, you have if you want to see like what are the files and folders that is present in your directory, we use this command ls. Okay. Then we have some commands that are related to the directory structure. Okay. So, will talk about that in a moment. So, let us first look at this man and ls. Okay. So, we can demonstrate this in the terminal, right. So, first ls, right. So, it simply lists all the files and directories that are present. Okay. So, I will move into one of the directories and we will see how this actually will list all the things. And we can use this command man on ls, right, to see how what kind of options we have, what we can get using this command ls. So, ls is list, right. So, it will just simply list the files and folders, but there are other options that you can use with ls that will give you some other information. Okay. So, I will just type man ls, it will open up a page, right. So, this is saying, right, how do you use it. So, this is actually description means list information about the files, right, and then you can have these options after ls, okay, and these options are given here. You can see this -a, right. These options we can use with the ls commands if you want certain specific information, right. So, some of these options there are, you will see like a huge number of options that are available, but they may not be required, right. Not all of them are required for our work. Okay. Again, you can go through them and you can identify which ones are useful, and we will use some of these useful ones in our work. Okay. All right. So, we can simply come out, it says like you can see at the bottom, right, you can press Q to quit, right, and it will simply come out of that manual page. Okay. Now, we will move into some of the commands that you use for working with the directories in Linux. Okay. Directories means folders, right, and these are the commands that we use. So, you will have the command called cd, which is change directory. Then you have pwd, which is the present working directory. You have something called mkdir, make directory, right. So, if you want to create a new folder, like just equivalent in Windows, right, you want to create a folder, you just say make directory or mkdir, right, and the directory name. So, it will be created. We will see in a moment how this works. Then you have these other commands. Again, I have highlighted them in red because you want to be very careful when you use these commands. Okay. So, rm stands for remove, right. You are removing a file, you want to remove a file or delete a file, then you will use this command rm followed by the file name. Then you have rmdir, you can probably guess this means remove a folder, right, or a directory, right, and or you can use rm -r. Okay. So, if you have data inside the folder, rmdir will return and say the folder is not empty, right. So, it cannot delete the folder. So, in that case you would have to use this rm -r command. Okay. Now, why have I highlighted them in red? Because you want to be very careful. Okay. If once you have deleted, there is no going back, you will not be able to recover the data, right. So, this is something that you have to keep in mind. Whenever you are using this command, be very careful. Okay. Be sure that you are deleting the right file. Okay. Otherwise, you will not be able to recover. Okay. So, before you use this command, I just wanted to talk about little bit about the Unix directory structure that is available, right. This is important because then you will understand this better where we are going. Okay. So, like Windows, right, you have this, let us say, a folder, then you have subfolders, right, so on, right. And similarly, the Unix directory structure, right, you have home at the top, then you can have user 1, user 2, right, multiple users in the Unix system. You can have ng's subfolder under user 1 and user 2, right, that is possible. And then you have, let us say, Illumina SMRT under ng's for both the users. Okay. So, what we want to do is we want to navigate these directories, right. We want to come from home to user 2 to ng's to Illumina, etc., using the command line. Okay. Not like a Windows where you kind of click on the folder and go in and in, right. Here we want to do this through command line because this is much faster, and you will see once you do that you will get used to this process. Okay. And it is really convenient that you can just move around with the command line, etc. Okay. So, let us now look into these commands, right, that we have just discussed, and we will run them in terminal and we will see the directory structure, etc. Okay. So, let us move to the terminal. All right. So, we are here and I have actually created on the desktop a folder called ng's data analysis hands on 1. Okay. So, let us now move into that directory, okay, and we will use the command ls, right, just to see what is there. Okay, so we have genome data analysis folder and we have test1 folder. Okay, so we have two subfolders inside this NGS data analysis hands-on 1 folder. Okay. So, to move into the genome data analysis, right. So, if you remember the user structure, the directory structure now that we just discussed, right, just in your head, right. So, NGS data analysis hands-on 1, this is the folder on top, then you have two subfolders, genome data analysis and test1. Okay. So, how do you go from one to another? We use this command cd, right. So, we have used this just before. So, cd genome data analysis. Okay, so, we have moved into genome data analysis and we can simply type ls and see what are the contents inside this directory. Okay, so, we will come to the content later on, maybe not now. Now, what do you see, what do you say, like let us say we want to come back to this NGS data analysis hands-on 1 directory again, right. So, what is the command? The command is cd dot dot. So, it will actually go one level up. Okay. So, if you remember in your mind again, we have NGS data analysis hands-on 1 at the top, then you have these two subfolders, genome data analysis and test1. We moved into genome data analysis. Now, we want to move back to the NGS data analysis hands-on 1 directory. Okay. So, to move up we use this cd dot dot, okay, and then we are back. Okay. Now, we can move into cd test1, right, and see what we have in there. We have nothing here, just created an empty directory. We can create now another directory inside, which is called mkdir, right. Maybe let us create this test2 directory in here. Okay. Now, we can again use ls and we see this directory has been created. Okay. We can go inside this test2 directory, right, and there is nothing inside, but what you can do. So, okay, I will clear the screen first. What you can do, we can actually look at the present working directory. So, one of the things you probably see, this is already mentioned right here, you actually kind of get an idea where you are, but you can also type again pwd, this will give you the full path, okay, in which directory, where in the system you are present. Okay. So, this is pwd stands for present working directory. All right. So, we have now used these commands, and what you want to do is we have used cd, pwd, mkdir. One thing we want to do is let us say we come back now. So, maybe we want to from here from test2 we want to go to NGS data analysis hands-on 1. Now, again visualize in your mind, we have this folder in NGS data analysis hands-on 1 at the top, then you have genome data analysis on one side, you have test1, these are the two subfolders of that folder, right, and then under test1 we have test2, right. Now, from test2 we want to go directly to NGS data analysis hands-on 1. How do you do that? So, this is 2 level up, right. So, cd dot dot slash dot dot. Okay. So, this you will see that we are back to this NGS data analysis hands-on 1. So, you can actually go 2 levels up by just using this dot dot slash dot dot. So, it specifies to the computer, right, okay, we want to go 2 level up, right. So, similarly you can do 3 level up, 4 level up, etc., just using the dot dot slash, right. So, as many as you want. Now, is there any way to go into test2 from here? There is, right, you can guess. So, we can simply write cd test1, then the path. So, we can simply give the path and we can again traverse multiple levels. Okay. You do not have to go one by one, right. So, this is where you see the like how this system can be so fast, right. You can go to different levels very quickly, right, without clicking onto the directory or going up one by one. Okay. So, you simply say cd test1 test2 and you are there. All right. Now, we will come one level up and we will try these commands rmdir. Okay. So, again I am saying like you have to be very careful what you are doing. So, please pay attention, right. So, rmdir will have this deleted the test2, right. So, we want to delete this test2 folder or directory, we just say remove directory and then we do ls and you see this directory test2 is gone. Okay. So, this is deleted. This will not happen if there is some sort of data inside test2, and then you would have to use this command rm -r then test 2. Of course, this will not work now because test 2 is not there. We can try that later, or you can try that later yourself using some folder where you have some, let us say, put some imaginary data or some imaginary file that is not really useful for you and you want to delete, you can use this rm minus r command. Okay, so these basic commands are clear. Now, let us go back to the presentation. We will actually discuss few more commands, right, and then we will also try them out here. Okay. Now, there are basic commands that we also use for moving and copying files. Okay. So, the command to move folder and files is the mv command, and we have cp command that actually copying files. Okay. So, if you want to copy a file, right, we simply use this cp command. If you want to copy a folder, then you have to use cp minus r. So, this is the option of cp, right. This gives you like, okay, recursively, right, repeatedly you copy the contents of the full folder. Okay. So, if you want to copy a full folder, you would use this command cp minus r. And scp is a variant of cp, it is a secure copy, right. It is kind of an encryption to the data that is being copied. Okay. So, let us try this mb cp minus r scp, right, and that will give us an idea, right, of how these commands actually work. So, let us try it on the terminal, right. So, what I will do again, right, what I will try is, now I have seen we have some data in the genome data analysis folder. So, again note how I am using ls, right. So, we are going one level up and then going into the genome data analysis, right. So, I know because this genome data analysis folder is under the NGS data analysis hands on one folder, right. So, we need to go to that level, then access the genome data analysis folder, right. So, that is why I am using ls dot slash going one level up, then into the genome data analysis folder, and we see there is a lot of files there. Okay. So, and I will just take example one file here, for example, this FASTQ file, right. We will actually look at these FASTQ files later, and we will also process these FASTQ files, right, through the quality control pipeline, but I will just copy and just to show you that how do you copy this file into another folder. Okay. So, we want to copy this file. So, we will use this cp because this is just a file, right, cp dot slash genome data analysis. We have to give the path, right, to the file and the file name D217539. So, D12 this one, and let us copy this read one file only. Okay. Read one part, sorry, yeah, read one part dot FASTQ. Okay. And we want to copy this. So, cp the file that you want to copy, the path or the directory to that file, right, that you have to specify in the file name, then followed by a space, then followed by the destination, right. So, the file that you want to copy and the destination where you want to copy this file, right. So, we want to copy this file in this directory. So, we just say dot. Okay. So, the dot means the current directory. If you wanted to copy to other directory inside this directory, then we have to use other commands. So, we will try that, right. mkdir test2, I am creating this test2 directory again, and let us imagine we want to copy this folder East reference genome from this genome data analysis folder into the test2. Okay. So, what we will use is cp minus r, because we are going to copy the full folder, right. So, that is why you need to use this minus r command, minus r option with this cp, right, and then we have to read one part and the destination. Now, the destination is not dot, not the current directory, but the test2 directory. So, that is why we are giving this test2. Okay. And what you will see now, we can see inside test2 directory and see, check whether this has been copied, right. Okay. So, this has been copied. Okay. So, what we want to do now, actually we have copied the FASTQ file, but we also want to copy the folder is reference genome, right. So, that is why we are using the cp minus r command. Okay. So, cp minus r command, we see whether we are getting this inside the test2, and you see this folder is reference genome has been copied now. Okay. So, copy and move, they are slightly different, right. So, copy is making a copy. So, it is equivalent to copy and paste, move is cut and paste, right. So, it will completely move the file, it will not be present in the original directory anymore. Okay. So, this is the difference between copy and move, and scp works in very similar way, it is just a secure copy. Okay. And we use this secure copy to transfer data between server and our system. Okay, let us look at the first last few commands, right. So, which will be used for exploring these files. Okay. So, once we have this generated this file, so we can use some of the commands in the terminal to actually look at the data that it contains. Okay. So, the first one is cat. So, what it will do, it will paste all the data that is inside a file into the terminal. Okay. So, sometimes you do not want to do that, because if these files are really big, everything will come into the terminal and then you may not be able to understand what is there at all. Okay. So, to avoid that, sometimes we use these two commands, head and tail. So, head will show you first few lines of that file and tail will show you the last few lines of that file. Now, compared to head and tail, we also have these commands more and less. Okay. So, we will use these commands, and you see this will actually help you in traversing these files much faster, right, or looking at the data much faster, rather than just first few lines. You can actually have more options to do a lot of things in there. Okay. So, we will do that with a data file now. We will explore these commands, this head and tail. We will not use the cat command, because as I said, it will paste everything in the terminal. So, we are working with quite big files, we do not want them in there, but we will use this head tail command, more or less more and less commands. Okay. So, let us try those. Okay, so, we have this file here. So, if you just type ls, you see this D12 file, this FASTQ file that is present, and let us see this head command here. Okay. And you see it will paste first few lines of that file. Okay. So, we will explore these files later on, the format, etc. And similarly, we can type this tail command, right, and again we will see these are the last few lines of that file. Okay. This is a FASTQ file, so that I will be in FASTQ format, which we will explore later on. We can type more, we can explore these more commands. Okay. And you see this kind of open, this will open the file, and this you are kind of, you can scroll down and up, right, using the up arrow or the down arrow, right, and you can actually come out of these files. Okay. You just simply say Q and you are out of these files, and you can simply clear. And similarly, you can use this less command. Okay. And again you have very similar function, right. So, you can go up and down using this up arrow and down arrow, right, and you can come out of this by typing Q. Okay. These are the few things that you can do. You can actually look into the file, inside the file, and you can scroll up and down using these more or less commands. Okay. So, we will talk about the editors now that are much more complex for exploring these files or doing something on these files, but that will be for the next class, right. They will have more functionality compared to these commands that we have just used, more or less. Okay. So, we have explored all these commands, and we have seen how to use these commands, and that help us in exploring these data files and seeing these data files. And here are the references that we have used for this class. And to finally summarize, we have actually seen, right, we will use a command line based system or shell for NGS data analysis, and I have just mentioned how you can set up this shell in case of Windows based systems. In Linux and Mac, you have this terminal already available, and we have also discussed some of the basic shell commands that allow us to navigate through this Unix system. And in the next class, we will actually discuss a few more commands that will be very, very helpful. Thank you.